Thank you so much for tuning in. This is the Rice Crypto Show, and I am your host, Chris Rice Crypto. And in today's episode, I have an interview with Riccardo Spagni, who is also known as Fluffy Pony. He is the lead maintainer for the Monero project, and we're going to go ahead and get right into today's episode. Like I said, ladies and gentlemen, today we are joined by Riccardo Spagni, aka Fluffy Pony. Riccardo, I really appreciate you taking the time to join me on the Rise Crypto Show. How you doing today, man?
I'm doing well, thanks, and thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, man, it's really cool. It's been almost a year ago, today almost, that we met for the first time at Nathan Hawk's Integrity Show in Las Vegas, right around the same time as DEF CON, which is really cool that I got to meet you in person at that event. And then something that I want to let people know, just in case they're unaware, but one of the coolest things that I've ever had anybody ever do or seen anybody do, I'm really good friends with Ken Bozak. And Ken Bozak is known for getting a lot of different cryptocurrency tattoos. And he talked to Fluffy Pony about him getting a Monero tattoo. And out of the graciousness of Riccardo's heart, he decided he would pay for it. So we actually booked an appointment within like 24 hours, went to the tattoo studio, recorded it. I actually have it on my DTube channel, so if people want to check that out. I know you live streamed it on Twitter as well. I just thought that was really cool, man.
Yeah, it was, I mean, my real motivation was I was deathly afraid that he'd be like, yeah, I'll get a Monero tattoo, and then never would. So I was like, dude, I'll pay for it. And then he was stuck. He couldn't say no. He couldn't be like, yeah, don't worry, I'll get it some other time. So it was totally selfishly motivated. I wanted to make sure he got that tattoo.
That's cool, though. I totally understand. It was still awesome, though. And I got pictures and stuff. I'll try to include that kind of stuff in a little bit of the reel of this interview. But if you don't mind, man, for people who might be a little bit unfamiliar with you, do you mind telling us a little bit about who you are and how you got involved in cryptocurrency?
Sure. So I started off as a developer, and we'll start off my IT career as a developer. Worked my way up to obviously a lot more senior position, and ended up becoming quite entrepreneurial. Started an import-export business with my wife, or soon-to-be wife at the time, and that import-export business eventually became quite successful. And I became I built a lot of the systems for it, and then suddenly I was non-operational because it had its own staff and everything was working well, and I didn't need to do anything on a day-to-day basis. So I had all this free time, and I discovered Bitcoin in early 2011, like May 2011, and so I was able to take all this free time and like really leverage it. So I did what a lot of people do when they first discover cryptocurrencies. I tried mining. My initial idea was, hey, I can take like the GPU that I already have in my computer and I can create free money. So it's not exactly how mining works, but in my head, I was like, that's how mining works. So yeah, I mined Bitcoin when you could still mine Bitcoin with a GPU. And then I started to think about, at the same time, I was thinking a lot about how Bitcoin could be broken, what its failure modes were, where the pain points were in terms of an attacker really being able to do damage to Bitcoin. So I spent a lot of time fiddling around with like Sybil attacks and that sort of thing, and really getting an understanding of Nakamoto consensus, and building this sort of, I guess, a deeper technical understanding than I otherwise would have had if I just treated it as a cool thing to play with.
Right.
And having the free time to do that was great. Ultimately, I ended up realizing that I didn't want to be a miner. I didn't have the capacity and energy to build a massive mining farm. And being in South Africa, electricity prices weren't really well suited to building a massive mining farm. And so instead I thought, like, what did early like gold prospectors do? Well, the ones that realized that they weren't going to find that huge nugget of gold. Well, they sold like all these support services to miners. They sold pickaxes and shovels. So I was like, well, what are the pickaxes and shovels for miners in the cryptocurrency space? And I started playing around with a lot of that, and trying to figure out things that I could build that would make it easier for miners. and ultimately ended up building a company that had a flat packable, stackable frame for GPU miners. And one of the challenges I faced with that company was accepting different types of crypto, because in 2013, late 2012, early 2013, if you were a cryptocurrency GPU miner, you were no longer mining Bitcoin. You were mining Litecoin or Feathercoin or whatever, you know, a bunch of different random coins. And then, of course, as a miner who owned a bunch of Feathercoin, when you wanted to buy a frame from me, you didn't want to pay in PayPal or Bitcoin. You wanted to pay in Feathercoin. And so that was like, and this is at a time when like the infrastructure we have today didn't exist.
Right.
So I would have to accept the Feathercoin manually, go and trade it on an exchange, you know, try and set sells so that I didn't get nailed by the markets, take all of that risk on myself. And it was really painful. So the process of like needing to do that made me start a cryptocurrency payment gateway called Globy, with the idea of making it easier for merchants like myself to be able to accept a variety of crypto. And Globy is a powerhouse that's in its own right now. It has its own CEO. It's doing really well. And there's a lot of really cool things that Globy is going to build in future. And in the process of starting that, I somehow managed to end up getting involved with Monero in early 2014 when it launched, and ended up being the lead maintainer of Monero for the last 5 years. And slowly stepping back from a lot of the things that I've done on Monero historically, in order to not be a bus factor or a central point of failure.
No, that totally makes sense, and you did a really good job explaining it. I didn't know that Globy came before Monero.
Yeah,
which I thought was really cool.
The first pieces of code were written for Globy in 2013 already.
Okay. Now with Monero, what I try to explain to people is Monero is, in my viewpoint, is the best privacy-related cryptocurrency out there. But could you try to simplify what Monero is to somebody who might be new to cryptocurrency, to give them a little bit of an idea? And then if you want, you can elaborate and get a little bit more technical.
Sure. So Monero is a privacy-focused cryptocurrency. It is very similar in many of its inner workings to Bitcoin. It's proof of work. It has inputs and outputs for transactions. You know, there's a lot of similarities, but it's not based on Bitcoin's code. It's a totally separate code base. It's its own code base. It had origins that it shared with CryptoNote cryptocurrencies in 2014, but it diverged very early on, and it's done its own thing for 5 years. So the code looks basically nothing like anything else out there. The whole idea of Monero's privacy is to provide strong privacy, but not perfect privacy, because that's a moving target and hard, almost impossible to do. So provide strong privacy, but make it mandatory. So every transaction with Monero is private. Now you can opt out of the privacy on an individual level as much as you want. So you can, for example, then this is true for any privacy system, you can make a private transaction using any private privacy enhancing cryptocurrency, and then go and post the details of that transaction on Facebook, and congratulations, you opted out of privacy. Monero provides mechanisms, cryptographically sound mechanisms, to disclose details of a transaction to a third party, or even publicly if you wanted to. So you can use Monero in a non-private way, but it requires effort on your part, and it requires you to choose who you're disclosing those details to. So as opposed to something like Bitcoin, where everything's out there in the open, and then you have to take extraordinary efforts to try and add even a smidgen of privacy to your Bitcoin transactions. So it's kind of the opposite of Bitcoin's privacy model, or lack thereof. And the whole idea in terms of what it provides is there are some areas where its privacy is very strong. So for example, in terms of hiding where transactions are going to, it uses something called dual key stealth addressing. So basically the address that you're paying is encrypted. In terms of hiding the transaction amount, that too is basically encrypted. It uses something called cryptographic commitments. In terms of hiding where a transaction is coming from, that's a lot harder. And we consider this one of Monero's slightly weaker areas of privacy, because you use something called a ring signature. So basically what happens is you take the whole blockchain, and when you're creating your transaction, and you say, I'm going to create this ring signature so that my transaction appears to come from a bunch of different transactions, some old, some new, and my real one is somewhere in that set of transactions that I'm creating a ring signature from. You don't have to own those old transactions. They can be owned by random people. And all you need is the blockchain. You don't interact with the people to create this. So you can do it totally offline. And then you create this transaction. And like I said, there's parts of the privacy that are basically like encryption level. No one's going to break them. And then there's this ring signature bit. And then off you go, broadcast the transaction. It gets mined and so on. So that's sort of the overview of Monero's privacy enhancements. It's not perfect because privacy is not a state that you can achieve. You don't go like, well, we've achieved this and we never need to touch it again. You know, we've encrypted this message and it can never be decrypted, because cryptography and cryptographic attacks are like every day there's something new. Every day there's some clever like researchers can now use the Wi-Fi router in your bedroom to figure out what you're typing on your keyboard. You know, like every day there's a new thing where researchers are doing some crazy thing to attack something. And so privacy is it's just a cat and mouse game. And Monero is constantly updating and improving and increasing the privacy as new research comes out that says, oh, hey guys, there's a slight weakness here, or there's a big weakness there. So and that's the most important thing. That's what makes Monero amazing, is the fact that privacy is the default, that it's not like an opt-in mechanism. So you are sharing the great pool of privacy with every Monero user. And the second thing is that Monero is never going to stop improving. It's always going to have this drumbeat of privacy enhancements and privacy improvements, so that attackers are thwarted and they go like, you know, well, we can attack some old thing, but they already fixed it.
No, I agree, and you know, this all goes into the community of Monero, and I do want to talk about that here in just a moment. But it's kind of a funny story about how Monero started. Do you mind kind of giving a little bit of an idea of how it started and how you got involved?
Sure. So Monero was launched by a guy called Thankful for Today. We don't know his real name. And at the beginning, he was kind of cool. Everything was fine. He launched it. He seemed like, you know, sort of benevolent dictator type. And within the first few weeks, the cracks started showing. He didn't really play well with the community. And the sort of everything came to a head when there was something he wanted to do. He wanted to make Monero merge mined with another currency. The community said no. The miners said no. And he was like, well, I actually don't care what you guys want. I'm going to do it anyway. And that was like the tipping point, because, you know, as someone who's been the lead maintainer of an open source project, you tread so carefully, because you can do like one thing wrong where you've like misread the community and done something that's upset the community, and they will just take the project away from you. You know, you are absolutely beholden to the community. And I don't think that Thankful for Today realized that. I think he thought that, you know, like my code, my rules, I can do whatever I want. So myself and 6 others, so 7 of us, forked the project away from him. At the time, it was called Monero, and we called our fork Monero. So the chain didn't change. There was no fork of the chain. It was just the code. Okay. And his code and our code both worked with the same chain for some time. But he kind of stopped making improvements and changes, and we just like barreled ahead, like, you know, doing all this work in a completely open source, decentralized, trustless way. We didn't really know each other. We were just like these 7 people thrown into a room who stuck our paw up and said, we'll fork it. Eventually, after time, I mean, like, he disappeared about 6 months after that. And pretty much by early 2015, his code no longer even worked on like getting 32-bit systems to sync up with the network.
Oh,
And
wow.
by the end of 2015, no, even earlier than that, sort of middle of 2015, his code, his fork never synced up with the network at all. So people stuck with us, and they abandoned what he was doing because he eventually abandoned it. And I think that really goes to set the pattern, and it really set the bar for how Monero works on a community level. That it's not enough to be the guy that launched it. It's not enough to be a good contributor. You've got to be the guy, or be the person, or be the developer, or be the woman, or whatever, who contributes in a way that the community is able to say, cool. Otherwise, like, you might as well not even bother. And that is really the spirit of open source. You are so reliant on that community. Otherwise, all you're doing is pushing your code up online, which is not really the same.
No, I totally agree. And as far as the community factor of Monero, I mean, it's intense. It's a truly decentralized open source project. You're called the lead maintainer, but people look at you as being like a leader of Monero, but there is no leader. It's a community effort. Everybody comes to consensus, and that's how everything works, and that's how you guys do your progression. Do you want to kind of elaborate a little bit about the things that go into like the whole community aspect, as far as like the core group, the community, the research lab, and some of the structure it goes on?
Absolutely. So Monero uses a model which is based on self-assembling work groups. So if you've anyone who's ever attended CCC, which is a hacker conference in Germany, will understand what assemblies are and how they work. And Monero is basically that, but online. So effectively, a work group is just a bunch of people that get together and they go, there's this cool thing we want to do for Monero. We want to do graphic design or legal or whatever. And so we're forming this work group, and it's self-assembling. So anyone can pitch up. You can do it as sort of open or as semi-closed as you like. But I mean, most of the work groups are pretty open. Very few of them have a very solid defined leader. There's always someone who's a little bit more organized or a little bit more outspoken, but it's not the same as being a leader,
right?
Or being the top guy. And the great thing about these work groups is, if you form a work group, so you form a work group whose job is to I don't know, like, make sure that, like, there's Monero has a village at DEF CON. So there's a work group whose sole purpose is to organize that village at DEF CON, and organize talks and organize tables and stands and people and all sorts of stuff. And if that work group does a bad job, there is nothing stopping anyone from forming a competing work group and being like, we can do a better job and this is how. So it's really like, again, every single work group plays to the community, because if you don't have the support of the community, then someone's just going to fork your work group. And there's a bunch of them that are, I mean, obviously, like, the core software has a development work group. The Monero GUI, the graphical interface, has a development work group. There's the Monero Research Lab, which is a bunch of academics who focus on, like, what will Monero look like in a year or 2 years or 5 years or 10 years? What are the emerging technologies and research papers that we should, as developers, be looking at implementing? They also do things like handling audits and whatever of implementations. There's the Monero Community Work Group, which is really responsible for, like, community things and a lot of meta information. There's the Monero Website Work Group, which deals with the Monero website and various aspects and parts of that. There's the Monero Vulnerability Response Work Group, which deals with bug reports and vulnerability reports, which come in via HackerOne. So not the normal bug reports that someone puts up on GitHub, but actual, like, exploits and vulnerabilities. How to triage those, how to handle them sensitively, how to make sure they're patched, and how to pay bounties out to researchers. And the Monero Malware Response Work Group, which helps people who have been infected by malware that mines Monero, or they've been infected by ransomware that where there's a Monero demand. The malware response work group helps people to clean their system, to get that stuff off if they can, and also to make sure that they don't get hit in future. So those are all totally. Oh, and the Monero outreach work group, I forgot about that, which is largely responsible for, I guess, like PR and marketing type efforts.
Mhm.
That's relatively recent. You know, they've been around, I think, for a year or so, because for a long time, a lot of people, myself included, said that Monero didn't need any marketing. And then eventually the Monero outreach guys were just a bunch of people that said, hey, we actually think it does. And they pitched up and they started doing things, and they've done such a great job so far. So yeah, I mean, these are all totally self-assembling. It's people who don't get paid. They can use, there's a crowdfunding system that Monero has, and they can use that to raise funds for things, which people do. And so it's not like they can't get paid, but there's no like treasury system or anything like that. People have to pitch up, do the work, and then go and be like, hey, we've proven we can do the work. Now we'd like to get paid for it by crowdfunding.
That's awesome, man. And I definitely think that the community is one of the strongest points about Monero, period. So, I mean, that's why I wanted to kind of go in a little bit of detail about what the community is about, and just kind of give everybody a little bit of an idea of like what kind of goes into a project like this and how much work is involved. And marketing is important. I understand as a decentralized project that you don't necessarily have the funds, but if you've got somebody that has a well investment in the coin and they believe in it and they're willing to take the risk of doing that on their own to do some promotion, to bring awareness, I definitely see that as a good thing. I think marketing, as much as you can try to get information out there, it's honestly the best way. But but again, there's no I in team, and there's no I in Monero. So
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that really strengthens me is a lot of people have said things like, oh, well, if Fluffy Pony dies tomorrow, then Monero dies. But I recently had a very minor health issue, which like kept me offline for a few weeks, or kept, like, I was online very sporadically for, man, probably like 5-6 weeks.
wow.
And despite that, like, just people stepped up to the plate when there was stuff that needed to be done. And when I was able to get online and there was a backlog of stuff, like, people had just pitched in and done the stuff that I would have otherwise done. Things just work in Monero, and it doesn't work because I'm around. It works because people pitch up and do their thing. And I am like the least significant person involved in making Monero do anything nowadays, which is really heartening, because there was a time when I was a little bit worried that I might be a bus factor. But here we are, mid 2019, and I can categorically say that is not the case.
That's awesome, man. And I mean, you're really humble, because I mean, I think one of your philosophies is basically teach people what you know, this so somebody can do what you do, because you never know what's going to happen to you the next day, and you're only as strong as your weakest link. And if you can make your team members as strong as you, then it's only beneficial for everybody. So that's one of the things. I got a lot of love for you in a lot of ways. And I mean, a lot of people, well, not a lot of people, but the governments, central banking, they're not very fond of private cryptocurrencies. So I definitely appreciate what you're doing. I did want to ask you about a couple other projects. One was the project Coral Reef. I was checking that out, man. I saw where you guys have online shopping with Monero at different online stores, and some of the stores offer 15% off when you're using Monero. And I noticed a lot of them were bands, a lot of artists, people like Slayer, which I thought was cool, Five Finger Death Punch. I saw Weezer, G-Eazy. Can you tell me a little bit about Project Coral Reef?
Sure. So Project Coral Reef is an ongoing effort. It started off with myself and one of my business partners, Naveen. We were like sitting around, bouncing a bunch of ideas for, like, how could we get Monero out there and make it really interesting. And a lot of the ideas that we kept coming up with were, you know, I mean, like we were like, hey, what if we went to Newegg and Newegg offered like a 5% discount if you paid with Monero? And maybe they, you know, and we go and we give them like a bunch of money to cover the 5% loss that they're going to make, because otherwise, you know, how are you going to convince Newegg to do that? And so then maybe they can only run that special for a month or two. And we were like, man, it's going to be amazing, because then people are going to be like, man, I can save 5% on my graphics card. And then they're going to go figure out how to use Monero. The problem was people aren't actually sufficiently motivated by a 5% discount to go do that. Because they don't have an emotional connection to buying a graphics card. You know, they're buying the graphics card. They just want the thing, and they want it in their house, and they want it to work, and they want to plug it into their computer, and they want to play Overwatch or whatever they're going to play, and they want max FPS. And we realized that people don't overcome friction unless they have a real emotional reason to do so. You know, so people overcome friction with Bitcoin or Monero because they have a need. They overcome friction with Bitcoin, as an example, because they see people getting rich, and then they think if they buy Bitcoin, they're going to make money. And so now they're like, it doesn't matter what the friction is. They will go research, they will go figure out, they will learn about exchanges, they will, you know, download wallets, they'll do all of that to acquire Bitcoin, because there's this like emotional thing of, I might get rich. People that use Monero, and it's not always that, by the way, I'm just using that as an example.
Right.
And Monero as well, people go like, I have a deep need for privacy with this transaction. I'm sending money to my family overseas, and I don't want anyone to know I'm sending them money. I am, you know, I have a need for a private store of value. I have a need to pay the supplier as a company, and I don't want my competitors to know who we use as a supplier and what discounts we get. You know, so I have this like deep need for privacy. So it's an emotional connection to privacy. I'm willing to overcome the friction. And so then we started thinking about what are things that people are passionate about, and we realized that music was one where people are emotionally connected. And so if it was possible for someone to get a discount on buying merch at their favorite artist, or for their favorite artist, from their favorite artist, they would overcome friction, because people, you know, people who are music lovers love merch. You know, obviously not everyone, but I mean, people who really love a band, they want to get the t-shirt. They want to have the limited edition poster. And, you know, like if they can get a discount, they will figure out a way to get Monero to buy that thing with the discount, because merch is expensive. So that was really the thinking. And we've gotten a ton of traction out of that. And we've also like been able to take other companies who are not, you know, music related at all, and be like, hey, look at this cool thing. We've got G-Eazy who's accepting Monero on his merch store. How cool is that? And he's offering a discount. Why do you think he's doing that? Here's a quote from G-Eazy that was in Billboard magazine about Monero. And then people go like, hey, that's pretty cool. And the pitch to merchants has been very simple. It's been like, privacy is cool. Even Apple's doing privacy in a big way now. That's how cool it is. And also by adding Monero, you're opening yourself up as a merchant to a whole new world of purchases. People who would otherwise have gone, oh, you only accept PayPal and Apple Pay and credit cards, gonna pass, thanks. So, you know, that's like, and merchants are I mean, it's the merchant acquisition process is slow and chunky, but we find gems, and people get excited when they get on board. So that's Project Coral Reef. It's we did a big, massive drive with it a couple of years ago, and since then we've just been rolling it and seeing ways that we can continue to extend and grow it.
I mean, I think it was cool. That's why I wanted to bring it up. And everything that we're talking about, I'll definitely include links down below so people can check out all these different projects. The last project I want to talk with you about, and then I have just another question or two, is I wanted to ask you about Tari. Because I know that was something you were talking about real heavily last year at the DEF CON, both at Integrity and when you spoke at DEF CON. It's an open source decentralized protocol that reimagines the future of digital assets. So is this kind of like, in a way, NFTs for Monero? Because I know this is a Monero side chain. Are they NFTs basically?
So it's both fungible and non-fungible tokens. So the best way to think about Tari is think about counterparty or even colored coins. I like to view Tari as like the spiritual sister to counterparty. It's like, what happens if you were building counterparty today, but building it on top of Monero instead of building it on top of Bitcoin? What would the decisions that you take look like? How would you architect it? Because, you know, counterparty was well architected at the time, but if you were doing it today, you would make different decisions. Right. So what does that look like? And how do you make sure that you're building for sustainability? You know, I mean, there's a lot of development effort that's required when you're talking about very generalized digital assets. So how do you make sure that you can do that today, but you're able to continue to develop that protocol in future? Because I think that's one of the things that counterparty struggled with was, you know, it's not a base layer. You don't need the sanctity on the base layer. You don't need the massive decentralization and open source free-for-all of the base layer. You need some of that, but you can also do things in a slightly more structured way because you're a side chain, or in the case of counterparty, embedded consensus chain. So it's, you know, that's a lot of the things that we've been doing and playing around with are like that. And that's not to say that Tari is developed in a centralized way. Even the process of creating the call it, I mean, white paper is the wrong word, but the set of RFCs which define how the protocol works that's been done in a totally open source way. It's been done through lots of discussion with the nascent Tari community on IRC, and through stuff on GitHub where people can come in and pitch up and comment and you know, suggest and so on.
What I gathered was this is a decentralized project that is being run by a centralized company called Tari Labs. Is that correct?
So kind of the best way to think of it is Tari Labs is the biggest contributor. It's not the only contributor, but it's certainly the biggest one. Okay. And so in a way, it's a little bit like, I mean, like Lightning. You know, you got Lightning Labs, and they're responsible for this like big Lightning implementation and a bunch of really cool things that are being done. But you've also got other companies that are building Lightning wallets and alternative Lightning implementations. So Tari, in much the same way, you've got Tari Labs, which is a major contributor to the protocol, but you've got other people scattered all over the planet who are going like, what about this? And what about that? And I'll write this, and you know, here's my suggestion, and so on. And just to sort of step back and to really sort of level set what Tari actually is. So it's a decentralized assets protocol that's focused on natively digital assets. So if you think about natively digital assets, what we're talking about are things that can exist in entirely digital form from start to finish. Things like loyalty points, in-game assets, in-game tokens, non-fungible tokens, digital collectibles, tickets, what else? Security tokens, ICOs if they weren't horribly illegal. You know, anything that your heart desires that you can create a digital token for, you can absolutely use Tari. And there are going to be a bunch of really stupid things that are going to be launched on Tari. I have no control over that, but I suspect that there are going to be some really awesome things built on top of Tari because of the functionality that we're building for it, and because of the way that we're making it easy, or the way that we hope to make it easy for developers to be able to pick Tari up and just use it like that.
Okay, that's very cool. Now, is this is Tari private like Monero is?
Good question. So Tari provides a different set of privacy constraints. The base layer is based on, or the sort of base chain that plugs into Monero is based on Mimblewimble. So it's not that it doesn't provide as strong privacy as Monero. It provides slightly weaker privacy, but better scalability. So that's sort of the trade-off. it's not in a very real sense. It doesn't compete with Monero on the privacy on privacy, because it's not designed for that. It's designed to be very scalable, but also provide a basic level of privacy, a reasonable level of privacy. On the asset side, it's going to be slightly different. So assets issued on Tari will have almost like a privacy slider, where the asset issuer will be able to say, this asset needs no privacy because, let's say, for regulatory reasons.
Right.
You're issuing a security token, and the SEC has said security tokens should be done in bounced around in a totally open way. You can't have any privacy. Or you're issuing an in-game asset, and your gamers don't really want everyone to know whether they have the magical sword of Azeroth. That's their business, not the whole world's. So then you slam the privacy slider all the way to the right. I think it'll be a bit more fine-grained than that, but that's conceptually the way I have it in my mental model.
That's kind of a really cool idea, though, and then I guess this could be also be used for like security token offerings. One of the things that I was really curious about when I was kind of digging into Tari, something that it reminded me of is I did an interview with Tron Black. It kind of reminds me a little bit about what Ravencoin is trying to do, because Bruce Fenton's big on security offerings, and I think that ultimately that's what the creation of Ravencoin was for, but they don't say that. They say that it was a tool that could be used for multiple purposes, but it's set up perfectly for the STO offering, especially when they have like the messaging system that they have going on, where you can actually message, like, let's say I have a security token, I can actually message all my shareholders or all the people who hold my token via their blockchain. So what do you see separating separating Tari from a company or a decentralized project like Ravencoin?
Good question. So I think very different architecturally to anything that's out there. And if anyone wants to dig in more to like the technical things that are going on, best place to hit up is rfc.tari.com, which has the current RFCs. They're in progress. So there's it's a living document. But rfc.tari.com has a bunch of really interesting info, deep technical info about how the system is being designed and architected. Anyone technical who goes and peruses that will see that it is vastly different from anything that's been done thus far. So I think the ultimate key difference is just like massive amounts of scalability because of the architecture and because of the constraints that we've put in. So we have a ticketing company that is setting up to use Tari when the protocol goes live. And when you think about tickets are very complex digital assets. So the fact that we have that forces the protocol to have to do a bunch of things in its design, not even in the implementation, just in the design. We have to think about things like tickets are largely temporal in nature. You buy a ticket, you go to the concert, you throw the ticket stub away. However, if you go to a concert like the last Michael Jackson concert, you're going to keep that ticket stub forever. So most tickets are temporal, but depending on the person, a ticket stub might need to last forever. There's also contingent things where, complex rules might be required for someone to purchase a ticket or to use a ticket. So, there's been incidences in the US at concerts where, there've been like domestic terrorism incidences. And so now if you have a large venue and you've got a concert that's going on and you might be worried about domestic terrorism, you might want to have some sort of like know your customer approach to people that are purchasing tickets. You might want them to go through like Clear or whatever. And how do you do that? How do you make sure that all the people purchasing your ticket, you know who they are? Because let's be honest, if you're going to buy tickets to a concert, you're not going to go alone. You're going to be like, well, I'm buying 5 tickets because I'm going with 4 friends. Now, the company you're purchasing the ticket from, they only know who you are. They don't know who your four friends are. And at best, they can ask for IDs at the door when the five of you pitch up, but by then it's too late, you know? So there's all these complex rules that can be, that can surround tickets, which are just totally nonlinear and not the normal way that we think of digital assets. And then you've got this other thing, which is really powerful. It's called the hot ticketing on sale. So there's a Taylor Swift concert that's happening, and tickets go on sale Saturday morning at 10 a.m. Well, you know what happens? If it's a 10,000 seat venue, you have like 150,000 people trying to buy those tickets on Saturday morning at 10 a.m. They're sitting there hitting refresh on the page trying to buy it. And when you're doing so in a totally centralized manner, easy, you know, scale up your AWS infrastructure, you know, hit up Kubernetes and off you go. When you're doing it in a decentralized way, that becomes deeply problematic. And anything that shoves assets on chain, anything that uses that as the mechanism, is then it's never going to be able to scale to that. But at Tari, the whole design has been forced by all of these considerations and many more, where the protocol has to be able to handle this incredible level of scale with robustness. So I think those are, you know, those forcing functions are the thing that makes Tari ultimately a very different beast to anything that's out there.
No, it sounds like an awesome project, and I definitely want to keep up to date with what's happening. So I'm going to do my best to follow along. The last real question I had for you was, I wanted to kind of get a little bit of an idea of how you got the nickname Fluffy Pony.
Sure. So
I was really curious about that one, because when I was in New York at Consensus, me and Ken Bozak, we took we obtained your Fluffy Pony little styrofoam thing, because you weren't able to make it due to some unfortunate incidences. And I did take a picture of you while you were like rolling around on your little scooter with the iPad, which I thought was really cool. You even had like a necklace on. But we took Fluffy Pony out on adventures in New York City.
I saw the pictures coming up on Twitter. It was amazing. You know, I mean, like, I was still there, even though I wasn't there. It was great. I went to all the parties. I just didn't go to them in person. No,
so how'd you get the name, man?
My first real job in IT was as a software developer at a company, and it was a company of like largely males, and there were these two girls, and their nicknames were Fluffy Puppy and Fluffy Bunny. I don't know why those were their nicknames. And they were lovely. You know, we were good friends. And I can't even remember like all of the circumstances surrounding it, but like one day they decided to give me this nickname. And it was, you know, like, I'll never forget, because, you know, a nickname like that, you sort of go, ha ha ha, funny, funny. And you think it's just going to be like a little joke that's going to last for a few days. But when it gets used over and over again, and when people don't let it go, then eventually it sticks. And you're forced to make this decision where you go like, well, I can push against it. I can sort of like rage against the machine, rage against the nickname, or I can just embrace it. And, you know, I didn't want to be like, I didn't want to fight it anymore. Like, I fought it for a long time. And then I was eventually like, you know what, it is what it is. I'm not going to fight it. I'm just going to embrace it. And, like a few years after that, I'd long left that company. I was still using the nickname. It was my Skype handle or something. And I was dating this girl, and she said to me, she was like, we need to talk. I was like, oh, great. I think we'd be dating for like 2 months or something. And she was like, I can't take you seriously with that ridiculous nickname on your email and on your Skype. And you got to change it, or else, you know, we're not going to work out. And I just looked at her and I was like, well, I mean, it really sucks that we're not going to work out then. And that was when I realized that I was stuck with it. You know, That's the
I
nickname
mean,
for life,
it's a
yo.
really cool story, and you got to embrace things like that. I mean, my name is Chris Rice. I grew up with all kinds of jokes like um, Uncle Ben's, anything white rice, dirty rice, and then it kind of the whole Rice Krispie thing kind of stuck for a long time. I'm a DJ. I was DJ Crispy, so I owned it. And then when I started becoming a content creator and figuring out what I wanted to call my show, Rice Crypto just sounded perfect because of the whole Rice Krispie thing. So
Yeah, it's a great name. It's a great name.
it's definitely got to own those things. I think it's a really cool story. I guess before we wrap things up, was there anything that you wanted to add that we didn't go over that you want to include?
No, I just what I just want to make sure that people know is they want to follow me. I'm Fluffy Pony on Twitter. They want to learn more about Monero. Getmonero.org is the email address, or at Monero on Twitter. They want to learn more about Tari, the at Tari account on Twitter, or Tari.com. Those are the best places to get that information. Otherwise, thanks so much for having me. I really enjoyed my time, and thank you for the amazing set of questions. We covered so much.
No, dude, I appreciate it. I really appreciate your time. I mean, I know we've had a lot going on. This is the third time we had to reschedule, but third time's a charm. And dude, I just love what you're doing so much, and you're such an awesome person. So I will have links down below. I do want to encourage people to also check you out with the other Magical Crypto Friends, because you are on a YouTube channel, Magical Crypto Friends. So I'll have links down below for that as well, so that people can check out the Magical Crypto Friends podcast. I appreciate your time again, man. I encourage everybody, if this is your first time ever checking out any of my content, make sure you explore my channel. And if you like what I'm doing, you can support me by subscribing, liking, commenting, and sharing. And as always, I encourage everybody to be the change by practicing change. And I love you all. Hey, thanks for staying all the way till the end. I just want to give a shout out to the Rice Crypto Show sponsors, HODL Brand. Gonna have links down below so you can check out their awesome crypto apparel, and you can also get 10% off using my code. Cyber Token, I'll have links for their website and the interview that I did with CEO Sean Key, and Monarch Wallet. I will also have links for Monarch Wallet's website, in addition to the interview that I did with Monarch President Robert Beatles, aka Crypto Beatles. So as always, thank you for tuning in. I appreciate you. I encourage you to be the change that you want to see in this world, and you can be that change by practicing change. And I love you.